Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hermes Speaks. It's Emily with Emily T. Astrology. I'm here after a few weeks off during Mercury's retrograde in the sign of Cancer in my fifth house of self-expression and creativity. Back at you to go over the month of August 2026. I'm going to be offering horoscopes for everyone during this month of August, and I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be back. It was a much needed break, but now we're back, ready to listen to Hermes, Mercury, our messenger god of astrology. We're ready to listen to Hermes speak. So I gotta say, I was hoping that these few weeks off would provide a little bit of a respite and time for relaxation and rethinking how I wanted to move forward with this channel and with this show. But, life was lifing. I was very busy. I had one kid who was in an intensive summer theater program that just wrapped up this past weekend, and having been a performing arts kid myself, I was very involved in that production and just, being a chauffeur, transporting here and there, going to see all the shows, all of that. I've got some stuff going on in my house where we have just learned we have a mandatory renovation that we need to do that's going to cost a lot of money that we don't necessarily have. I've got one kid who's really struggling with some challenges right now that is making sleep for them and for my husband and I hard to come by. So there's been a lot going on. And even though I took some time off, I'm still pretty unclear about what I want to do. I do know one thing, that I will not be doing weekly episodes for the next foreseeable future. It's just proving to be too much with my life to come at you every week. So for the next at least few months, I will be coming to Hermes Speaks every other week. I love doing this. I love this work. I love talking astrology. I love listening to Mercury speak. And also I have a life. I've got 3 kids. They've all been off for summer break. I haven't had a single day this summer so far where all 3 of them were out of the house at the same time. So here we are, living life, being real with you, and scaling back a little bit to every other week. A couple of other announcements before we dive into the month of August and your horoscopes. I just recorded during this past month a couple of collaborative episodes with some friends and colleagues of mine, so be on the lookout for those. I will be coming back here once those episodes are live, linking them in the show notes and or the comments of this episode here. But I did a monthly overview conversation with my friend Erin Dosh of Astrology with Erin. She works with a collaborative group on a channel called Awakening Airwaves, and so she and I had a lovely conversation breaking down transit by transit the month of August. That will be airing soon. I also met up with my friend Mallory Hasty, and we were talking about the nodes of the moon changing signs, moving into Aquarius and Leo, North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo. That did just occur as I am recording this. The nodes have officially moved, and we break down that transition, the nodes moving out of Virgo and Pisces and into Leo and Aquarius. So check that out. I will be linking that episode as well. And one last announcement, I have just recently begun to offer an additional service through my readings. I am offering a family constellation year ahead reading. So this is for you if you are a parent, or it doesn't have to be children. It can be siblings, parents of your own, grandparents, up to 4 family members. We break down those charts and we look at the year ahead in terms of, are there periods of time where one or the other of you might be needing some extra support, when one or the other of you might be shining? Are there periods of time when everyone's chart is kind of being activated, and so we can use that information to know that maybe that particular time everyone needs a little extra grace? These kinds of things I have just started offering this. I've really been enjoying it. So if you have been wanting to take a look at the year ahead with how the astrology is interacting with both your chart and the charts of your loved ones, then come to emilytotomer.com to learn more, to book that reading. Super excited to be offering this new reading. So check that out if you are interested. Also at emilytotomer.com, all of my other services and offerings are available as well. Okay, so I think that's the announcements underway. So let's dive into the month of August 2026, and we will move into horoscopes as well. So, overview of the month. The month of August 2026, I am seeing two main themes. The first of which is we have a couple of oppositions across fire and air sign axes that are continuing the configuration that many astrologers have been referring to as the basket or the cradle or the minor grand trine, these different configurations that have been referred to over this past month. During the month of July, that was really coming online with Jupiter moving into Leo, Jupiter forming an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, a sextile to Uranus in Gemini, and a trine to Neptune in Aries. And so this is forming this cradle basket configuration where we have the fire and air signs in supportive aspects, the sextiles and the trines, with the backbone of that one opposition between Jupiter in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. This is a fairly rare configuration to have these slow-moving outer planets all in the same degree of the zodiac. Right around the 19th, 20th of July, we saw all of these planets, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, at 4 degrees of their respective signs. Highly unusual and rare for all of these slow-moving planets to come into that level of exactitude right around the same time. So this is a continuation, what I'm seeing for the month of August 2026. We're seeing a continuation of this, even though Jupiter has now moved out of that, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees of Leo. We will be seeing Mercury move into Leo after its retrograde in Cancer, finally moving into the sign of Leo, and it will form these same aspects that Jupiter just formed in the month of July. It will form an opposition to Pluto. It will form a trine to Neptune in Aries and a sextile to Uranus in Gemini. So Mercury is kind of coming through and bringing a more personalized or a more mental or cerebral or intellectual processing of what was maybe more collective, mundane, zeitgeist, societal that we were seeing in July with Jupiter in that position. And not only that, but we also see Venus moving out of her sign of fall, where she's fairly depressed in Virgo. She's going to be moving into Libra, where she has high dignity. This is one of her home signs. And she will get involved in this configuration, not making the same exact aspects, but having a conversation with all of these same planets. Venus will move into Libra, and she will now form a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius, an opposition to Neptune in Aries, a trine to Uranus in Gemini, and then she and Mercury will also form a sextile from Libra to Leo, Venus in Libra, Mercury in Leo. So we've got more fire and air. We've got more fire and air, and as I just kind of alluded to, in July, we saw this with Jupiter and then those 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which is a little bit more of a collective, mundane, zeitgeist context feeling to it. And keep in mind, these are incredibly slow-moving planets. Jupiter is not incredibly slow. It takes about a year to go through all of the signs, but Uranus and Neptune and Pluto spend years in each sign. In the case of Pluto, sometimes decades. So this is not something that, okay, month of July happened, whatever was coming out of this configuration, it's like, there it is, boom, done. These are slow moving processes. Whatever was kind of being stirred up in July, initiated, or maybe a turning point, is just the beginning. These are things that are going to unfold over the next several months, if not years. The month of July was this like seeding point, but we still have no idea where this is all going to go. But in the month of August, we do get a little bit more of an integration, a little bit more of a personalization, bringing it down and in a little bit more from the context and the mundane and the zeitgeist level, the societal level, because we have Mercury, our planet of the mind and information processing and communication and speech, our messenger god, Hermes. We have Mercury getting involved in this configuration, and we have Venus, our planet of relationship, of love, of tastes, of preferences, another fairly personal planet, if we think about what our unique personal preferences are, getting involved in this configuration. And so whatever was coming up, seeded, begun in the month of July, now we're beginning to process it in a little bit more of an individual level, but still, this is months, years in the unfolding, right? So that's one of our main themes, and it includes those two oppositions between fire and air signs. We've got Mercury in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius, and we've got Venus in Libra, who will be opposing Neptune first, and then later in the month, she will oppose Saturn also in Aries. So we've got these two polarity points. In addition to that, we have those nodes that I talked about that Mal and I broke down, have now moved into Leo and Aquarius, that same axis of Mercury, Pluto. So that is another kind of focal point. This is the first full month out of the next 18 when the nodes will be in these signs, when we are seeing this axis of this fire and air axis of Leo and Aquarius really highlighted by those nodes of the moon, lunar, fortune-oriented, fate, destiny, very kind of fated points in the sky. So we have a high emphasis on Aquarius, Leo, and then with that, Venus and Libra opposing Neptune and Saturn in Aries. We have a high emphasis on that opposition as well. So that's the first kind of main theme, a continuation of fire and air, those houses in our charts, an oppositional energy between the Leo and Aquarius and the Libra and Aries axes, those dichotomies. So that is one of the themes that I am seeing. The second main theme for the month of August is kind of underground. Like the main dynamic thing that we're seeing is that fire and air. But underground, beneath the surface, kind of brewing and simmering, we are seeing the completion, the culmination, the final, or the beginning of the end of two-year processes in two of our water houses, Cancer and Pisces. So what am I talking about here? The first, we are seeing at the end of the month the final eclipse in Pisces in this series that happened over the last 2 years when the nodes were in Virgo and Pisces, right? The first eclipse in Pisces was in September of 2024. We had another Pisces eclipse in September of 2025, and now we're having our final Pisces eclipse at the end of this month on the 27th or the 28th of August, depending on your time zone, the final eclipse in Pisces. So this is a 2-year storyline that has been taking place in the sign of Pisces, in the house that comprises Pisces in your natal chart, that is culminating, that is ebbing, that is coming to completion, right? And then we also have in the Cancer sign, the Cancer sector of our chart, another 2-year story that is coming to a close. And that is because in September of 2024, that same month as the first Pisces eclipse, we saw Mars move into Cancer. Mars was in Cancer from September of 2024, and then it moved forward into the beginning degrees of Leo, and then it stationed and turned retrograde in the earlier degrees of Leo in December of 2024. It moved backward, back through those early degrees of Leo, back into Cancer, spend some time going retrograde through the sign of Cancer. I think many of us, if you follow the astrology and have been for the last couple of years, remember that period of time. It was a bit brutal, that extended fallen Mars in Cancer period of time. But then it stationed, turned direct, moved forward again through Cancer, moved forward through Leo. And then we finally cleared that kind of Mars and Cancer story that took place over the winter and spring of December of 2024, moving into 2025. And then very shortly after Mars departed from the sign of Cancer and Leo, where it retrograde, we saw Jupiter move into Cancer in June of 2025. And Jupiter spent a year there. We've talked about this a lot on this channel. Jupiter spent a year in Cancer, moved out at the end of June in 2026. And then what just happened? We had a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Cancer that now, this month, August 2026, is moving out. And what do we see later this month in August? We see Mars returning to the sign of Cancer. Not to go retrograde there, don't worry. We're not repeating that passive-aggressive nightmare, but we do see Mars moving back into that sign. And so this is also the completion of a 2-year story where the Cancer sector of our chart has been highly emphasized. There's been a lot around emotional healing. There's been a lot around what makes us feel safe, what makes us feel at home. There's been some tribalism. There has been some insularity for sure over the last couple of years. But now we're completing that. And now Mars is going to step into Cancer, stay there for a couple of months, move forward into Leo, where it will go retrograde again, but that's a whole other topic. And now I think we're seeing the culmination, the completion, the beginning of the end of this 2-year story of the processing, the questioning, the kind of asking of ourselves how we feel safe, how we feel nurtured, how we feel secure, what makes us feel emotionally healthy. And now Mars is saying, okay, I'm not going to go back up and through here again. Now I'm completing this 2-year story and saying, what actions, Mars, can we really take that will allow us to really feel secure in our emotional safety and what is our home and how we feel nurtured. So that is a completion in our Cancer sector that is beginning this month as well. So we have these 2 water signs, Pisces and Cancer, that are both completing 2-year cycles right now. And that's kind of the underpinning, the fluid beneath the skin of our experience during this month of August, is the culmination in those 2 water signs that's taking place, the completion, fruition, the finality of that, the ending of that, while dynamically, outwardly, expressively, maybe circumstantially, we are seeing the fire and air oppositions, trines, sextiles that are being lit up. And that's kind of the more surface level experience that we're having over this month, while the underpinnings is this watery completion taking place in Cancer and Pisces. Oh yeah, I haven't even talked about this yet. On the 12th, we have a solar eclipse in Leo at 20 degrees of Leo. That's right. How could I forget to talk about that? But that's another big thing this month that is taking place, again, along this axis, the Leo and Aquarius axis, because we've got that eclipse, solar eclipse, which is a new moon, sun and moon coming together in Leo, close enough to those lunar nodes that have just moved into Leo and Aquarius for it to be an eclipse. Okay, so your overall themes for these 2 months: fire and air, dynamism, tension, action, seeding points, changes, shifts, all taking place in our lives across these sextiles and trines, but most importantly, I think the oppositions of Venus and Libra to Neptune and Saturn and Aries, and then the Mercury Pluto opposition across Leo and Aquarius, coupled with the nodes in Leo and Aquarius, coupled with the solar eclipse in Leo mid-month on August 12th. So that's theme 1. And then theme 2, your completions, culminations, finishing of those 2 signs / houses in your chart of the Cancer story of Mars retrograde in Cancer, Jupiter through Cancer, Mercury retrograde in Cancer, and now Mars moving back in to kind of complete the story into Cancer, and the final eclipse in Pisces after 2 years of eclipses, all lunar, interestingly, in that sign. Okay, so for your horoscopes today, and I have to say, I had a book pull for each sign, and I cannot find the notebook where I wrote the page numbers down. I have looked everywhere, and I'm taking that, I'm listening to Mercury, Hermes Mercury speak, and I'm taking that to mean Mercury was like, you're trying to bring in too much, girl. This is too much for one episode. So no bibliomancy today, okay? We're just going to do your horoscopes. And the way that I'm doing your horoscopes today, we will be looking at axes of signs. So I will be breaking down a horoscope for Aries and Libra, for Taurus and Scorpio, Gemini and Sagittarius, and so on and so forth, okay? So looking at those dyads, because we have those 2 oppositions really loudly emphasized, and then I will mention just a little something for each specific sign regarding the culminations in the water signs of Cancer and Pisces. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. Axes horoscopes or polarity horoscopes with a little nod to what is taking place in those 2 water houses for each specific sign. All right, so if you are an Aries or a Libra rising, or you can listen to your sun sign if you'd like. But if you are an Aries or a Libra, then the 2 axes that we are looking at that are highlighted with those opposition points this month are across your 5th and 11th houses, where we find Leo and Aquarius, and then also your 1st and 7th houses, where we find Aries and Libra. The Leo and Aquarius signs across your 5th and 11th houses are going to see us having power dynamics, shifts, new beginnings, endings, kind of tension and pulls between our communities, our networks, our hopes and wishes and dreams for the futures, benefactors, allies, friends, and our sense of personal expression, our sense of creativity, and our joy, our pleasure, our romance, our play. There's going to be tension between these 2. Who are we as individuals? What lights our hearts up? What is the way in which we want to shine as an individual? And how is that in opposition, in tension with who we need to be in community, what the community is asking of us, who we are, how we need help, how we are seeking help from others. This is a strong tension this month because we have a solar eclipse in one of these 2 houses, either your 5th or 11th, depending on if you're an Aries or a Libra rising. And we have the Mercury opposite to Pluto. This is new beginnings, endings, shifts, power dynamics, tension, conflict. There is a push and pull between your sense of individual self-expression, creativity, joy, and then your communities, your networks, who you need to be, what you need others to be, what's going on there. There's a tension there. There's some conversation at play that might have a little bit of a feeling of something fated is coming in that's changing the trajectory of one of these 2 areas of your life, and the tension of one of these areas changing is going to have to be dealt with or seen or handled in the opposing sign. Now we have the Venus in Libra opposing Neptune and Saturn in Aries across your 1st and 7th house axes. Now, the way that I'm looking at this is because Venus is kind of has the upper hand here, at least with Saturn for sure, because Venus is in her home sign of Libra. She has dignity. She is well-resourced in this place, whereas Saturn in Aries is in its fall. It's depressed. It's petulant. It's not able to kind of do its normal Saturn thing as easily in the sign of Aries. So the way that I'm really looking at this opposition of Venus and Libra to Neptune and Saturn in Aries is like Venus is now ready to accept the consequences of whatever choices have been made across this axis. That there might be some hard consequences. There might be some like heaviness here, but Venus is resourced enough and diplomatic enough and sophisticated enough in Libra that she can say, I'm ready to accept whatever the consequences of my choices have been. And those choices for our Aries and Libra risings are around who we are as individuals, how we are developing as a person, maybe some health or body things, and our relationships, our primary one-on-one partners, our spouses, our romantic relationships, our business partners. There's a tension along this axis of self and other that is asking of us to rise up and accept whatever consequences of our choices that we have made. And that's okay. We can do it. We can, if we surrender and accept the consequences of our choices, we can then move forward, right? We can build a plan. We can find a sense of diplomacy. So that's what I'm seeing. Something that's going on between you as an individual versus your primary partnerships and relationships. There is a moment of the acceptance of consequences across this dynamic of self and other and primary relationships for our Aries and Libra risings. So for our Aries specifically, we are looking at the completion of a 2-year storyline that is taking place in Cancer and Pisces, your 4th and your 12th houses. So there is something around spiritual work, the releasing of attachments, the connections to home and family that is completing for you now. There has been a lot of work, a lot of emotional, maybe shadow work that's been taking place over these last 2 years in areas of what your private life, of who you are behind closed doors when you're sitting on the couch with your pint of ice cream, of what makes you feel nurtured and safe at home, and of some subconscious, shadowy places, ways that you kind of can release or are being asked to or forced to release ego. There is a storyline that's been ongoing for 2 years that is now culminating and completing in these 2 areas, your 4th house and your 12th house, home, family, nurturance, roots, foundation, and subconscious, shadow realms, blind spots, unconscious patterning that we have that's been taking place. Look for a culmination there that might be kind of going on under the scenes, simmering below the surface. There's something completing and finishing out there for our Aries risings. For our Libras, the completion that's taking place in the Cancer and Pisces sector of your charts is in your 10th and your 6th houses. These are 2 houses that are associated with Arta, or sometimes called 2 of the work houses. The 10th being the place of career, public visibility, reputation, work and calling and vocation in the world. And the 6th being the place of effort, toil, self-sacrifice, daily habits, daily work. It's the chop wood, carry water house, right? So what 2-year storyline has been going on with who you are in the world, your reputation, your work in the world, your public persona, how you are known visibly, and that the actual effort, toil, work, habits, places of self-sacrifice. There's been a 2-year storyline that's been kind of brewing in these places that is coming to completion, coming to fruition, beginning to ebb out, that is taking place for our Libra rising. If you are a Taurus or a Scorpio, then the solar eclipse, the nodes of the moon, and the opposition of Mercury to Pluto are taking place across your 4th and 10th houses, and the opposition of Venus and Libra to Saturn and Neptune in Aries is taking place across your 6th and 12th houses. So the 4th and the 10th for that, the nodes of the moon, the solar eclipse, the opposition of Mercury and Pluto. This is your private life, your family, your literal property, your foundations, your roots. This is how you feel safe, what you do behind closed doors, versus the 10th house that I was just talking about is our place of reputation, calling, career, work in the world, vocation, public persona, how you are known and seen in the world, how you show up visibly and publicly in the world. So there's a tension, there's a push and pull across this axis. Something is shifting, maybe ending, beginning, that feels perhaps faded, that needs to be kind of mirrored and seen across this axis. Is something happening with family, with parents in your home that then needs to be addressed or dealt with in your public persona and your career? Are you getting a new job, or are you leaving a job that then is changing how you're showing up privately in the world? Maybe you're moving into working from home or out of working from home. This dynamic of the private versus the public is highlighted, is perhaps there's going to be power dynamics around it for our Taurus and Scorpio risings. There's some tension that needs to be dealt with between the private life and the public life, the home, work-life balance for sure coming up as just a catchphrase for this for you. Whereas the Venus in Libra opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries, I'm seeing this as, again, that Venus in Libra, highly dignified, well-resourced, opposing Saturn and Neptune. Saturn in its fall, depressed, unresourced, petulant, kind of cranky. Venus is in a position where she says, okay, let me, I'm sophisticated, I'm capable, I'm able, I'm resourced. Let me accept the consequences of the choices that I have been making. It's time. There might be something hard, there might be something challenging, but I can accept the consequences of my choices. And this is across your 6th and 12th. This is a place of, in the 6th, self-sacrifice, efforts, work, health, like health challenges, habits, daily toil, versus the 12th house of the release of attachment of the ego, of the places of isolation, of respite, of retreat, of the subconscious mind, of the subconscious patterning, that unconscious patterning that kind of governs our life from behind the scenes and we don't even realize. So there's something along this axis that's like, it's time for me to accept the consequences of my choices. Maybe in the 6th house, you have been overgiving, you have been sacrificing of yourself. You've been having daily habits that are no longer sustainable. And there's something in here that's like forcing you to accept the consequences of the fact that you have been overworking yourself, right? And that might mean there's a health issue. That might mean something forces you to slow down, something like that. But there's a moment here in the month of August 2026 with Venus in this opposition, so well-resourced, dignified in her home sign, sophisticated and seeking balance, seeking harmony. She can say, it's time for me to accept the consequences of whatever choices I've been making along this axis of the subconscious, excuse me, of the patternings that are governing me from behind the scenes, versus like my actual daily habits and effort and toil and work that I'm doing. This is a moment of kind of reckoning around that it's time to accept the bitter pill, swallow the bitter pill, and move forward around this tension, this axis of the 6th and the 12th. Specifically, if you are a Taurus, then the culmination of this 2-year storyline of the final eclipse in Pisces, and then the Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, and now Mars again in Cancer is taking place in your 3rd and 11th houses for our Tauruses. The 3rd house is our place of our local community, our neighbors, our siblings. It's also the place of the beginner's mind, or of communication, how we express ourselves and how we kind of differentiate ourselves from our family of origin. That's why we see siblings in there. Like sometimes there's sibling rivalry in the 3rd house. And then the 11th house friends, groups, benefactors, allies, hopes and wishes and dreams for the future. So these two are two of the houses that are sometimes referred to as our social houses. So there is a 2-year storyline that has been ongoing, that's been process oriented, that has maybe been emotional, more emotional than verbal, that's been taking place for our Tauruses across the ways that we communicate, the ways that we express ourselves, our dynamics in our local environment, and then how we show up in community at large, what we are expecting of our friends and benefactors, or what maybe they're expecting of us, how we need to show up in our networks. That is a 2-year storyline that is now culminating, that is completing, that is, completing its process. Was there something that started for you in how you communicate? Maybe you started a podcast. Maybe you've been thinking about starting a podcast for the last 2 years, and now you're finally going to do it. Maybe there's something that's going on. You're finishing a 2-year stint on a board. I'm thinking of a board of something, like I'm on my kids' school board in the 11th house. Something is coming to completion for our Tauruses around how we communicate, how we show up in community, and what we are expecting of community, how we're interacting with our siblings. There's a 2-year storyline that's coming to completion in these areas for our Tauruses. For our Scorpios, then the completion, the final Pisces eclipse, and the 2-year Cancer sector activation is taking place in the 9th and 5th houses. Now, these are 2 of our Dharma houses, 2 of the places that speak to our purpose. The 9th house being our place of guiding life principles, of meaning, of truth with a capital T, religion, philosophy, ideology, long distance travel, and that can be literal or of the mind, the experiences that shape us, that shape our belief structures. And then the 5th house, the place of self-expression, creativity, joy, children, the place that if we are living in our alignment with our purpose, with our Dharma, the natural sense of expression and joy that emanates from us. So there's a 2-year storyline for our Scorpios in particular around what brings us joy. What makes us feel like we are being expressive in a way that feels joyful and pleasurable. Maybe there's been something, if you happen to be a parent, maybe there's something that's been going on with your children that's now completing as a 2-year storyline. And also, how have your beliefs been changing, shifting? Is there something that you used to hold on high and think of as kind of your guru, your mentor, your guide? Whether that's a philosophy or a religion or a political ideation or an actual person that is now losing its luster, is coming down off of a pedestal. So for our Scorpios in particular, there's some 2-year storyline around joy, pleasure, creativity, and self-expression. And then our guiding life principles and beliefs that's culminating now, that's coming to completion and fruition, the final that is taking place in these 2 places for our Scorpios. If you are a Gemini or a Sagittarius, then the Leo Aquarius axis, where we see the Leo eclipse, where we see the nodes of the moon, and where we see Mercury opposing Pluto, is taking place across your 3rd and 9th houses. And the 11th and the 5th houses is where we are seeing the polarity, the opposition between Venus and Libra opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So for that Leo and Aquarius axis across the 3rd and 9th house, we are looking at, really, this is the axis of the mind or communication. With the 3rd house, we're looking at beginner's mind. We're looking at how we begin to communicate, how we differentiate ourselves, how we speak, how we connect with our local community, our local environment, our neighbors, our grocery store, our gas attendant, these kinds of things in the 3rd house, very kind of localized and initiatory beginner's mind communication interaction with our community around us, local community, versus the 9th house, which is the higher mind, the belief systems, the ideologies, the thoughts and principles that guide our lives, our mentors, our gurus. Both of these houses too, the 3rd and the 9th, can have to do with travel. The 3rd house to do with short distance travel, going to said grocery store. And the ninth has to do with long distance travel. So going, taking yourself out of your comfort zone into places that feel foreign. And that can be, again, literal or metaphorical or, armchair travel, that kind of thing. But this dichotomy is getting lit up for our Geminis and Sagittariuses. So something is giving push and pull. There's tension. There's perhaps power dynamics. There's something fated coming into play around these two things. Perhaps you're starting a new field of study. Maybe you're going to be moving into teaching. Maybe you're going to start writing something that you're looking to publish. That's very third, ninth house. I know for myself, I started studying seriously with in a formalized way, astrology when the nodes were, and therefore the eclipses were taking place across this axis, my third and ninth house. So there may be some new writing projects, new communication projects, new ways that you're interacting with neighbors or your local environment or siblings that is beginning or ending, or new beginnings, shifts, something fated taking place in a higher education setting, maybe a trip abroad that changes your guiding life principles, changes your worldview, how you see the world, how you interact with the world. So there's tension and dynamics, perhaps some power dynamics between these two areas, the beginner's mind versus the higher mind. And then we are looking at the polarity of Libra and Aries, Venus and Libra opposing Saturn and Neptune and Aries. Venus, well-resourced, dignified, able to kind of seek diplomacy, sophistication, and harmony in her home sign of Libra, opposing a fallen, depressed, kind of cranky, crunchy, petulant Saturn in Aries. I'm seeing this opposition as it's now time to accept the consequences of our choices. And this is taking place for our Geminis and our Sagittarius, as I said, across the 11th and the 5th house axis. So accepting the consequences of our choices with what brings us pleasure, our children, our sources of self-expression, our creativity and our play, and also how we show up in community, how community shows up for us, our networks, our friends, our allies. Do we have high dreams and wishes for the future that have to do with the collective, with community, that are somehow at odds with our own personal sense of self-expression and play? But now is a moment of reckoning, of being able and resourced to maybe swallow the bitter pill and accept the consequences, the results of our choices that have been taking place somewhere along this axis. Our own sense of creativity, joy, pleasure, play, maybe something with a child, if you're a parent, and how we show up in community. This is highlighted for our Geminis and Sagittarius, the acceptance of the consequences and the results of your choices along this axis. If you are a Gemini specifically, then the 2-year storyline culminating between the final eclipse in Pisces and the Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars again story in the sign of Cancer is taking place in your 2nd and 10th houses. These are two of our work houses, our Arta houses, the 2nd house comprising our resources, our income, our possessions, our skills, anything that resources you as an individual, and the 10th house, our place of career, vocation, calling, public visibility, reputation, and work in the world. So we have some 2-year storyline that is completing across the 2nd and the 10th houses. This could very well be something to do with work for our Geminis. What has been happening over the last 2 years with your job? Are you finally getting that raise that you've been working so hard for over the last 2 years? Is something shifting where you're a couple of years ago, you were I don't think I'm happy in my job anymore. It's not providing the resources that I really need, or maybe my skill level is kind of stagnating, something like that, and now you're finally able to move on. There's some 2-year storyline having to do with your public visibility, work, reputation, and career, and the resources and skills needed either to perform that job or in receipt of that job that you get, your income. Something like that is culminating, is completing, is finishing, and it's been a process. It's maybe been an emotional process around worth for sure for Geminis, that word is coming up. Like what around your own sense of worth these last 2 years has been developing, has been in process. That's culminating now for our Geminis. If you are a Sagittarius, then the 2-year storyline that is completing in the 2 water signs of Pisces and Cancer, the final Pisces eclipse in your 4th house, and then the Cancer sector where we have seen Mars, Jupiter, Mercury retrograde, and then now Mars moving in again for its kind of completion of this 2-year storyline, is in your 8th house. So these are 2 of our moksha houses, our places of liberation from the world. In the 4th house, this is where we go behind closed doors, where we sit on our couch at the end of the day, where we have our private life, our foundation, our roots, what helps us to feel grounded and rooted in this life. And the 8th house, the place of expectations from others that we have on others or that they have on us, of inheritances and debts, of the release ultimately of the attachments to the world, to our material goods, right? This is how we are enmeshed. This is the place of enmeshments, entanglements, expectations, the 8th house. So there's a 2-year storyline that's been taking place for our Sagittariuses that is now coming to a close around our private life, around our family. I could definitely see the connection between the 4th and the 8th house being that maybe there has been an elderly grandparent or something who has been ailing for the last 2 years, and now they pass. And then now there's a question of how their money, their estate is being divvied up amongst the surviving relatives, that kind of thing. There's something around the culmination, completion, ending, final of the storyline for our Sagittariuses around home, family, roots, foundation, and then the ways that we are enmeshed with and entangled with others. That's coming to completion. That is ultimately, hopefully, where we are seeing some liberation from these attachments. We're seeing the release of expectations for our Sagittariuses out there. If you are a Cancer or a Capricorn, then the Leo and Aquarius axis, where we are seeing Mercury opposing Pluto, where we're seeing a solar eclipse, where we're seeing the nodes of the moon across Leo and Aquarius, is your 2nd and 8th house axis. And your opposition between Venus and Libra to Saturn and Neptune in Aries is taking place across your 10th and your 4th. So the Leo and Aquarius axis across your 2nd and 8th, this is the axis often referred to as our axis of resources. The 2nd house is where we see our personal resources, our skills, our possessions, our incomes, anything that resources us as an individual, versus the 8th house is the place of enmeshments, entanglements, expectations, inheritances, debts, the ways that we owe others, that they owe us, the ways that we are entangled with and connected to other people in our lives. So there is some tension, some push and pull, perhaps something that feels faded, or there are power dynamics around our own personal resources this month and the ways that we are in receipt of others, or the things that are expected of us, or what we are expecting of others. There's a dynamic tension going on for our Cancers and Capricorns across this axis this month. This could definitely be something to do with inheritance, taking out loans, the forgiving of loans, maybe paying off a credit card. This could definitely be a windfall of personal money coming in. Perhaps you're getting a loan. This could look like settling divorce situations for some of our Cancers and Capricorns. We might be like coming to the final agreement around how the separation of assets is taking place. Something like this is happening for our Cancers and Capricorns across the axis of resources. And though I have been mostly referring to actual literal money, this can be energetic resources, time resources, skill resources. This can be across any of these aspects, not just solely money. And then we're looking at the Venus opposed to Neptune and Saturn in Aries, Venus and Libra opposing Neptune and Saturn in Aries across your 4th and 10th house axis, this is the axis of work-life balance, right? This is the fourth house is home, family, roots, foundation, property versus the 10th, career, work, vocation, reputation, public visibility. And the way that I'm looking at this with Venus in Libra kind of having the upper hand, because Venus is in her home sign, she's dignified, she's well-resourced, she has the ability to be harmonious and diplomatic and sophisticated, versus Saturn over there in Aries is depressed and fallen and feeling a little cranky and feeling like he can't really do the mature, slow Saturn thing as easily in the sign of Mars, of the fast initiatory and impulsive of Aries. And so I'm really seeing this as Venus is stepping up here because she's resourced enough to do so, to accept the consequences of the choices and actions that have been made for our Capricorns and Cancers, specifically across the axis of private versus public life, home versus work, family versus career and reputation. So this axis, we're at a reckoning point. We're at a point of it's time to accept the consequences and the results of the actions and choices that we have been taking across this axis. And it might be hard. It might be like kind of ouchy, but we're able to accept. We're able to kind of like take it. We can say, okay, I can accept whatever those consequences are of the actions and choices I have been making. Maybe something at home that has been needing my attention, and it's resulted in that I haven't been able to do my job as well. And so something is happening there. Maybe there's a reprimand or something. I don't know, making that up. But this is a moment during the month of August 2026 when our Cancers and our Capricorns are able to, maybe uncomfortably so, but they are able to step up and accept the consequences of whatever choices and actions have been taking place in the public versus private, home life, family versus career, reputation, calling. For our Cancers specifically, the 2-year storyline that is coming to a close in the Cancer and Pisces signs and sectors of your chart, the final Pisces eclipse, and the Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars again storyline over the last 2 years that's been taking place in Cancer is happening in your first house and your ninth house. These are two of our Dharma houses, the places of purpose. The first house, the purpose of who you are. Who are you? What are the characteristics of you, yourself, your body, your development as an individual, your psyche, your body? And the ninth house, your guiding life principles, your connection to truth with a capital T. There's been a 2-year storyline around who am I? How am I developing as an individual? What is taking place? Maybe there's been something going on with your body over the last 2 years in your actual physicality that is now coming to a close, a fruition. Maybe there has been something with your health that you've been trying to figure out. And now with Mars's final entrance, not final, I mean, he'll come back in 2 years, but the culmination of this 2-year story with Mars moving back into your first house, Cancers, that there is like, now I know, I've been going through this process for 2 years. Now I know how I'm able to take action finally to kind of shore up my own personal health. And at the same time, there has been a process of shifting beliefs and principles and ideologies. The sense of truth with a capital T, that has been undergoing a process of change, of shift, of maybe being buoyed, maybe being expanded upon, because the North Node has been there. The eclipses have been North Node eclipses in Pisces in your ninth house. So something around who you are becoming as an individual, your body, your character, your personality developing at the same time as there has been shifts and calling in and maybe deepening or changing of your belief structure that's been going on for the last 2 years, that's now culminating, that's finding a completion point. For our Capricorns, we're looking at the culmination, the 2-year storyline culmination of the final Pisces eclipse and the Cancer activation with Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, and now Mars again, taking place in your 3rd and 7th houses. These are two of our social houses. The 3rd house, the place of siblings, neighbors, the local environment, how we communicate and express ourselves, maybe how we speak, write, think, all kind of 3rd house topics. In conjunction with the 7th house, how we relate to one-on-one individuals, our primary one-on-one relationships, our partners, business partners, romantic partners, spouses, these kinds of things are all found in the 7th house. So there's this 2-year storyline that is completing for our Capricorns around really our social interactions. What has been taking place in relationships over the last 2 years that has been developing, that has maybe been emotional, that's been process orienting, what's taking place in relationships, and then how you communicate about those relationships, communicate and express yourself in your local community environment. There's a completion for our Capricorns in these 2 areas, a kind of storyline finishing up. Maybe you've been taking a class, a local community college class or something like that over the last couple of years that's really been getting you to process information. And then now you're ready to talk about it, to talk about what you've learned. And maybe you've met somebody through that class that is now becoming, that relationship is deepening in the 7th house, something like that. But there's a storyline, a 2-year storyline across like how you think, how you communicate, how you are interacting, with your local environment, and then how you're showing up in relationship, how relationship is showing up for you. That's taking place for our Capricorns. This is the completion of a 2-year storyline there. If you are a Leo or an Aquarius, then the Leo-Aquarius axis of the nodes, the Leo solar eclipse, and the Mercury opposite to Pluto across Leo and Aquarius is taking place across your 1st and 7th houses. And the Venus and Libra opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries is taking place across your 3rd and 9th house. So the 1st and 7th, where we see the kind of dynamic, loud, faded shifts, beginnings, endings, power dynamics, the kind of push and pull, the tug of one side of the rope is needing the attention, and so the other side has to respond. There's a mirroring effect. This is taking place across your 1st and 7th. This is very personal. These are 2 of your angular houses. The 1st house is the house of self, of body, of character development, of personality, and of psyche. And the 7th house is your primary one-on-one relationships, romantic relationships, business partners, clients if you work in a one-on-one client setting. This is very dynamic and loud and angular for our Leos and Aquariuses. So something this month is coming up, maybe being seated, maybe there's shifts. You're going to look back in a few months and be like, oh yeah, that thing that seemed perhaps small that started in the month of August 2026 ultimately became a huge moment in my life. It started a big shift, a change to do with you, yourself, your body, how you're developing as an individual, and your relationships. Could certainly see some meeting some new people, perhaps starting a new relationship that becomes pivotal and important in your life. The endings of important relationships could be taking place for our Leos and Aquariuses. Your relationship to yourself is up for realignment and changes and shifts. That's all taking place across the 1st and 7th, the self and the other. It's dynamic. This is an important month and time period for our Leos and Aquariuses, especially with Jupiter moving through Leo and this along this axis for our Leos and Aquariuses for the next year. The nodes being there for the next 18 months. This is big. This is a big important time for you, Leos and Aquariuses. And then with the Venus and Libra opposition to Saturn and Neptune in Aries, that is taking place across your 3rd and 9th house axis. Venus is resourced. She's in her home sign. She's dignified. She's able to step up to the plate and offer diplomacy, harmony, and balance. And she is opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Saturn not feeling so good in Aries, depressed, fallen, not able to kind of do his normal Saturn thing as easily as he would like. The way that I am reading this is that this is the opportunity to accept the consequences of our choices and actions for our Aquarius and Leos across your 3rd and 9th house axis. This is the axis of the mind, of education, of communication, of publishing, of travel. In the 3rd house, commutes, short distance travel. In the 9th house, long distance travel of the mind, perhaps the experiences that take you out of your comfort zone and put you into kind of foreign environments that shape you, that help you to grow, that help you to change your worldview. So there's something that's been taking place maybe along this axis of the 3rd and the 9th that is asking of you to, you had to make some choices. Maybe you started a higher education program. You decided to go to school, and that has been great, but it's come at the cost of your ability to show up in your local environment. Like, I don't know, just what's just coming to my mind right now is, what if you decided to go back to school, and that has meant that you've had to figure out like a whole system of carpooling to get your kids to their school because you're now in class, or something, I don't know, something like that. This is a moment of reckoning, of maybe swallowing the bitter pill around accepting the consequences of the choices and actions that we have made and taken. And we can do it. We can accept it, even if it's tricky or difficult or uncomfortable, because Venus says, okay, I'm well resourced. I can find a way to make this feel okay, at least to feel harmonious. This is a moment of accepting choices and actions that you have taken and the results of those choices and actions across the axis of communication, publishing, education, travel, beliefs. So if you are a Leo specifically, then the Cancer and Pisces 2-year storyline that is coming to a close with that final Pisces eclipse, and the Mars retrograde, Jupiter, Mercury retrograde, Mars moving back into Cancer storyline. This is in your 8th and 12th houses. So for our Leo specifically, there's a 2-year storyline that is culminating in the 8th house of shared resources, entanglements, enmeshments, expectations, the ways that we are connected and conjoined with other people. That can be financially, energetically, emotionally, mentally. There's something culminating there, as well as the 12th house where Cancer is in your chart, Leos, where we have been seeing that kind of deeply process-oriented, healing but painful work of, Mars and Jupiter, and then Mercury going retrograde, and now Mars moving back into your 12th house of the subconscious mind, of our unconscious patterning, of our blind spots, and also of how we retreat from the world, where we find respite, where we find the disentanglement, the release of the attachment to the ego and the self. These are all 12th house topics. So there's something that's been going on for the last 2 years for our Leo specifically around attachments. This is what I'm thinking. This is like shadow work, a lot of shadow work. Maybe there's been something to do with a debt or a loan or inheritance that's like been like in the process, and it's bringing up all sorts of old things from your childhood. Like there's somebody, like a great uncle died and they left some money to you and a sibling in a will, and you're like, it's bringing up all this stuff, like shadow stuff, 12th housey stuff around. You always felt like your sibling was the favored one. I don't know. I'm making all of this stuff up. But there's been a 2-year process around the ways that we are attached to things, to other people, and then the need to release from that. This is a deeply kind of existential and spiritual process, I think, that has been going on for our Leos. That's now coming to a completion, a fruition, and closure in this month of August. If you are an Aquarius, then the final culmination, release, end point is taking place with the last Pisces eclipse in your 2nd house, and then your storyline of Mars moving into Cancer, then Jupiter, then Mercury going retrograde, and now Mars returning to Cancer is taking place in your 6th house. So these are 2 of our work houses. The 2nd house, the place of resources, income, possessions, skills, and the 6th house, the place of our self-sacrifice, our efforts, our toils on the daily, the like challenges that arise through which we must persevere. These are arta houses or work houses that are associated with the pursuit of material security and happiness. And so there has been a 2-year storyline going on for our Aquariuses out there that is now coming to completion around this. So the ways in which you give of yourself, the ways in which you work, maybe the challenges that have been arising that you have been having to like push through and persevere through, and then how that shows up with the way that you are in like what you receive from that effort, like the money that you earn or the skills that you have developed from the daily efforts and habits that you have been making. There's a 2-year process that is coming to completion now, that it perhaps has been emotional, that has perhaps been deeply personal, and there's been some sense of kind of defensiveness around it. Perhaps that there's something that has been deep and personal and process oriented around worth, and then the things that you do on the daily that allow you to bring in things that resource you. There's a storyline there that for the last 2 years has been going on that is coming to completion now for our Aquariuses. If you are a Virgo and a Pisces, my cat is coming to say hello. This is Clover. Then the Leo eclipse, the nodes across Leo and Aquarius, and the opposition of Mercury to Pluto from Leo to Aquarius is taking place in your 6th and 12th houses, your 6th, 12th house axis. And the opposition of Venus in Libra to Saturn and Neptune in Aries is taking place across your 2nd and your 8th house axes. So for the Leo and Aquarius axis of your 6th and 12th, some power dynamics, tension, shifts, changes that perhaps feel faded, that, new beginnings, endings, maybe something that at first seems small is becoming really big, and vice versa. Something that used to be really important or big is becoming minute and insignificant across your 6th and 12th houses. The 6th house is the place of effort, toil, self-sacrifice, challenges that arise through which you must persevere, daily habits and toil, and pets. My little kitty decided to show up when I'm talking about the 6th house. And then the 12th house is the place of the subconscious, our unconscious patterning, places that we need to retreat, where we have kind of ego death. We're letting go of our personal connection to ourselves because the 12th is falling away from the 1st house of self. I'm going to let my cat out. I'll be right back. So there is some dynamic tension, some push and pull, some mirroring that's taking place across this axis. This feels a little existential, shifts in where you are giving of yourself, your habits, your efforts, and what that means for your subconscious mind. I gotta say, Virgo and Pisces, this might be a month in which something happens that kind of forces you out of the daily efforts. I hope not. I hope it's nothing big, but maybe some like little illness or something. Maybe a minor accident happens that forces you to go into a retreat or to, be at home for a few days or isolate, that kind of thing. So this axis of like, I'm working on the daily, I'm chopping wood, I'm carrying water, I'm showing up daily with effort, with toil, with self-sacrifice. How is that shifting? How is that changing? How is something faded coming up that is shifting that, starting something new or ending something? Are you doing shadow work? Are you going to start a therapeutic process? That could very well be nodes in the 6th and 12th. So something along this axis of our material everyday work and effort and toil, and then our spiritual, subconscious, unconscious, shadowy places, blind spots, that is shifting. Some new process is beginning, something is ending, something faded is bringing things into the limelight for our Virgos and our Pisces. And then we have the opposition of Venus and Libra opposing Saturn and Neptune in Aries across your 2nd and 8th house axes. I'm seeing this opposition between Venus and Libra and these two planets in Aries is that Venus is well-resourced. She's dignified. She's in her home sign. She is capable of what she wants to do here, which is be harmonious, diplomatic, sophisticated. And then we have her opposing Saturn in particular in Aries, who is the kind of the opposite, is depressed, is fallen, is in his place of being far away from where he exalts in Libra. So we are seeing the moment where we can accept the consequences of our choices and actions across the 2nd and the 8th house axis. Venus is able to accept the consequences, accept the results of what we have chosen, what we have done. So I'll use myself as an example here, because this is me. I'm a Pisces rising. We have some stuff going on, as I said at the very top of the show, around needing to renovate a bathroom that we didn't know we were going to have to do. And it's going to cost a lot of money that we don't necessarily have. But this, to me, feels like the 2nd and 8th house axis, like Venus in my 8th house opposing Saturn in my 2nd house, resources, right? I can accept the consequences of our choices. Like, I'm going to need to sign a contract to have somebody fix our bathroom. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend X number of dollars on a bathroom renovation right now that we maybe don't even have. Maybe we have to take a loan out, these kinds of things. But something around the accepting of consequences or results of choices and actions across our axis of resources. It's a reckoning moment this month of August. This doesn't have to be money related. This can be energetic, emotional, food related, skill related, anything that resources you, and then the ways that you are enmeshed, entangled with, indebted to, owing, or owed by others. Maybe a bitter pill that needs to be swallowed, but you can swallow it. It's okay. You can. You're resourced. Venus is resourced enough to do so. She's capable. If you are a Virgo specifically, then there is a 2-year storyline that is completing for you in the Cancer and Pisces sectors of your chart. Cancer, your 11th house, and Pisces, your 7th house. So with the 11th house, your house of Cancer, where we had seen a Mars retrograde and then Jupiter for a year and then Mercury retrograde and now Mars coming in to complete the story and start a new one, set the stage for another 2-year story. And then the final Pisces eclipse in your 7th house. These are 2 of your social houses, the 7th house being the place of one-on-one primary relationships and partnerships, and then the 11th house being communities, groups, networks, benefactors, friends, allies. So there's a 2-year storyline that is culminating, completing, that has been a process, maybe an emotional one, maybe that has been one where there has been lots of friction. There might have been a couple of years of dynamics for our Virgos in particular, like friend challenges. Like, are you cutting out certain friends or community members from your life that are really just not showing up for you in the way that you need? Or is someone cutting you out? Maybe has there been a process that you've been undergoing for the last 2 years around community that has perhaps been painful? Maybe there's been an element of the insular or the tribalism in your communities that you've been kind of like working against, processing through. That's coming to completion now. That's been a 2-year process that's like finding its end point. And then with the final eclipse in Pisces in your 7th house, what's been going on in your relationships? What's been changing in your relationships? Is something starting new for a partner? Are you starting a new relationship? Are you ending a relationship? Has it been something that you have been watching happen for a partner? Like, is a partner going through some kind of change that you're witness to, that you're there for? Something is culminating, completing, coming to fruition and ending in your primary one-on-one relationships or for someone who you consider to be a primary relationship. That's happening for our Virgos. If you are a Pisces, then the 2-year storyline that is completing now with the final Pisces eclipse is in your 1st house, and then the Mars going retrograde, then Jupiter passing through, and then Mercury going retrograde, and now Mars coming back to Cancer is taking place in your 5th house. So there's a 2-year storyline that is culminating, completing, and coming to fruition around who you are as an individual, how you're showing up, how you're developing your character, your psyche, what's going on with your body. Has there been a storyline that's been happening with your body over the last couple of years that you have been like in the process of trying to do maybe some healing work around health or figure out some answers around what makes you feel the most healthy? That could be coming to a completion now. We've got also, maybe there's been a lot of process that has perhaps been painful or like passive aggressive or defensive to do with how you show up in self-expression, your sense of creativity. Maybe there's something going on, has been going on with a child if you're a parent. Maybe if you're an older parent with an adult child, you've been watching something going on for them for the last couple of years. That's possible too, but there's a storyline wrapping up and completing around these 2 areas: who you are developing, how you are developing as an individual, your body, your sense of self, your personality, your character, what has been changing, coming online for you around that, and then what has been happening in your places of joy, creativity, self-expression, children, and play that maybe has been like emotional. Like, these are 2 water signs: emotional, challenging, very deeply processing, perhaps spiritual in nature, perhaps to do with the primary need of comfort and safety. There's something completing here, a 2-year storyline that is coming to a close for our Pisces, specifically in the 1st and the 5th house. Okay. Woo! I think we did it. I think we got through all 12 signs. Man, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Please pop in the comments. Let me know what's been going on for the last 2 years with this 2-year storyline completing in your Pisces and Cancer sector. Love to hear your stories. Please like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share it with your friends. I do love showing up here. I do love talking astrology. I can do it all day long. It's what lights me up. So thanks for being here with me. And remember, I am now offering that new family constellation year ahead reading, as well as natal chart readings, year ahead readings, solar return readings, do it all. I even got an option for a kind of shorter snapshot big 3. So come see me for a reading if you've been wanting to consult with a professional astrologer. I'm your gal. Love to do it. Hope you're hanging in there. July was a big month. August looks to be equally big and monumental and important. We're living through interesting times, friends, very interesting times. And I, for one, am so grateful to have astrology to help provide, for me, a backbone of meaning to kind of ride the waves of this, this moment in time. Take care, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye, everyone.